My name is Mark Edwards. I'm an IT consultant from London, and 15 years ago I had the BHR operation at the age of 38. Today I'm back for my 15-year checkup to make sure all is well and hunky-dory with the prosthesis, and so far so good. Everything's looking as good as the day it was put in. I first felt some discomfort in my right hip at the age of about 27 when I was playing rugby. There was no diagnosis at the time. I just thought I had a groin strain. I gave up rugby for other reasons, but continued to play sport actively, particularly squash, for the next 3 or 4 years before realising that something was a bit more seriously wrong with my hip, and at that stage it was diagnosed as being arthritic. So I gave up squash, and within a few years I was walking on a stick. I went to see a surgeon with a view to perhaps considering the possibility of surgery. At the time it was deemed I was probably too young. The surgeon in question was proposing a traditional sort of hip replacement approach, and at the age of 34 or whatever it was I was at the time, it was felt just too soon, given the likely need for a revision after 15 or 20 years or whatever the going rate was at the time. I don't recall him saying that my activity would be particularly restricted, but neither was he giving me a great deal of confidence. I must admit I was feeling a bit uncomfortable about the idea of that kind of surgery. It was a pretty significant operation, and I was still very young, so I'm still keen to be active insofar as it was possible. I was just about to embark on having a family. Obviously I want to encourage my children to be active and lead by example, as it were. I was at a sailing club, funnily enough, and a chap in the bar came who my wife knew, was curious about the walking stick, and it turned out that he was working with Mr McMinn at the time on the development of the prosthesis for the Birmingham Hip Resurfacing. And he gave me a very good selling job about the benefits of resurfacing over replacement for people of my age and desired levels of activity. So that's how I came to hear about it. No more was said for a while until I went to see a surgeon. Went back to see the surgeon in Harley Street after the condition of the hip deteriorated somewhat that year. He talked then about the idea that perhaps I should have the replacement, and proceeded to tell me about all the terrible things that entailed in terms of the procedure. And I sort of stopped him there and said, I met this bloke in a bar who told me about this resurfacing business, and he said he was quite happy to refer me to Mr McMinn, whose work he was aware of, with a view to me considering that option. And that's how I came to meet Mr McMinn. Yes, he gave me a very upbeat selling message about the benefits of resurfacing over replacement for younger people who wanted to remain active, and he cited some examples of people who'd had the prototype operation who went back to doing judo and fell running and all of this kind of very impressive story. And that very much persuaded me that it was something I was prepared to go for. I realised it was a fairly new procedure, but I know he'd done a fair number of prototype operations. So I was of the view, given my age, that there was sort of nothing ventured, nothing gained really. And even if a relative new procedure didn't work out, I could have always, it still left me in a position to have a full replacement if that was necessary. So, but I was quite confident that given the success of his prototype campaign, as it were, that it was a relatively low risk for me to have a resurfacing rather than a replacement. So at the age of about 38, it was decided that I'd have that operation. I was just about to have our first child, so we were very keen that the operation was out of the way before he was born. So back in 1997 this was, we managed to get the operation in just in time, just before the baby was born, which was great. And after about 6 weeks, 6.5 weeks maybe, I was back at work, walking without a stick.
Was your wife pleased to have you back on your feet to help with the baby?
She certainly was, yes. She wasn't very wild about the idea of having to change surgical stockings while she was 8.5 months pregnant, but the plan all came together really, and I was in a position to do all the fatherly duties that were required. I have sailed since. Last year was the last time, I think, and we probably will again, but I've skied most years since then, at least since the children have been old enough to take skiing. So I've been skiing probably every year for the last 10 years, which has been brilliant because that's one of the key things I wanted to keep doing. And I still swim an awful lot, so in fact I did the swimming leg of the London Triathlon as a part of a relay team, which was great.
And this was post-operation?
Yeah, yes, this was sort of about 5 years ago. But that was, you know, a fairly intense swim, if you like. It was a 1,500 metre open water swim, which was competitive, so it's probably the most tired I've felt since the operation. Yes, you seem very pleased. I mean, I'm no radiologist, so I have to take my lead from what the surgeons say, but they were very pleased with the condition of the hip as shown by the x-rays, so I can only take heart from that. There have been no issues with it, and it seems to be, as I've said, in good nick. So yes, I'm quite confident about where it is, and I'm not nervous about what the future may hold in relation to a hip function. Now, clearly I have no personal knowledge or experience of how a total hip replacement may have been, but certainly my expectations were that had I had one as offered, I wouldn't have been nearly as active either immediately afterwards or certainly not 15 years on from it as I've been able to be. So in that respect, you know, I'm delighted that the hip resurfacing has allowed me to continue with an active lifestyle and enable me to keep fit, which is all something that's been important to me for so long. And you know, the fact that there seems to be no deterioration in function 15 years on is only very encouraging, so I'm very pleased really with the outcome so far. I guess to me the real testimony is that I now take it for granted that I can lead a pretty full and active life without sort of giving a moment's thought to the fact that 15 years ago I had arthritis, and I do remember the day I was diagnosed and a real sinking feeling at the age of 31 that I should have such a debilitating disease at such a young age. And but to be perfectly frank, you know, until you ask the questions, it's not something that I've thought about since, because you know, there's nothing stopping me really from pretty much doing what I need to do and what I want to do in terms of leading an active life. So yes, I guess I have to say I'm very pleased to be able to be in that position now.